Levanto mis ojos a los...
When he was your age, what was his prayer life? Well, since he was a child, remember that he prayed the rosary every day with his father. And that we saw that in the Church of Waterways, the little chapel of the Blessed Sacrament. Everybody saw that little chapel in the back? That it has a huge image of Our Lady of Czestochowa. No, I'm sorry, Perpetual Help. So he learned to pray the rosary since he was very, very little. That's why he called the rosary my favorite prayer. He also went to the Blessed Sacrament every week, especially on Thursdays, when he was a child, smaller, with his mother, and then with his father. Then, when he was about 18, 20, he joined a prayer group, which was called the Living Rosary. And the one that was leading that prayer group was, it was a layman that gave him the True Devotion to Mary, the book of St. Louis de Montfort. And so that's when he began to read St. Louis de Montfort, and he said that was a turning point in his life. Why was it a turning point in his life? Because he was having a kind of struggle in his heart between the love that he had for the Blessed Mother and the importance of the Blessed Mother in his life, but also a normal question that we sometimes hear. You know, am I giving too much attention to Our Lady and not giving so much attention to Christ? And so he said that book was a turning point because he understood how Our Lady is the shortest, the perfect, the perfecto, corto, fastest way to Christ. And so all his questions were answered by St. Louis de Montfort. So I believe that his prayer was the rosary, definitely reading the gospel. He had a profound love for the gospel. Also, every Friday he prayed until the Friday before his death. He prayed the way of the cross every Friday since he was a young man. And so imagine, that's why he developed such a profound devotion to the cross and the sufferings of the Lord, such a profound devotion to Our Lady and the Blessed Sacrament. So it was very simple, because actually for us Catholics, prayer is very simple. We go to Jesus in the Blessed Sacrament, we speak to him heart to heart, we allow him to speak to us, we read the gospel, and we have the magisterium of the church that explains the gospel and the scripture for us. We pray the rosary, and that was basically his spiritual life. And the Living Rosary prayer group was very important for him. Okay, any other question? Okay, his relationship with Divine Mercy, if it came about through Saint Faustina, or how did he come to know about God's mercy? Okay, it's a very important question because we're coming to be merciful, and we are in the year of mercy. But John Paul began to know about Saint Faustina, even though it was not very much public that what was the name of the sister who was receiving the revelations. But everybody in Krakow knew that there was a sister in that convent receiving revelations about the Divine Mercy. And when we go, which is just across, and this is beautiful, the shrine of Jean Paul is connected to the shrine of Divine Mercy. We just have to go across a bridge. But so I don't know exactly from here, but when we get to Divine Mercy, just like 1 kilometer from Divine Mercy is the mine that he used to work with, ¿cómo se dice? Cantera, Father? When he worked as a stone quarry. Remember that he used to work in one. That actually, that there's a lot of stories there. But one of the stories is that he always kept under his arm the book of True Devotion to Mary. And he was known by the young guy with the book. Yes, and every time he had a moment of rest, which it was not a lot of time, he will open up the book and read something about a lady. But a couple of things happened at that time. I mean, everybody knows there's a revelation of divine mercy happening in Krakow, so people begin to be aware of it. Also, difficult times are happening in Krakow, and people know that they need to turn to God and that they need to turn to the mercy of God. They had a profound understanding that in the times of difficulty, we need to turn to the mercy of God. So let's say that was like a general understanding of the church in Poland. When we are in difficult times, we need to turn to God's mercy. And actually, if you see your sweatshirts, what is it that we say in the back? Humanity will have no peace until they turn with trust. It's not only that we turn, we need to trust with a specific disposition. Trust to His mercy. And at that moment in history, well, there was the Nazis' occupation. He was seeing a lot of people die, a lot of his friends die. He actually did not understand why he didn't die, why he was sent to work with the stones and not to a concentration camp. But there was a specific moment during the time that he was working that he said that at that moment his eyes were open to the importance of divine mercy. And it is that they're working in the mines and cutting the stones, and there was an explosion. And one of his friends from the place was killed in the explosion. And so he was the one that had to go and carry his body. When he was walking with the body in his arms, he realized that that's what a lady felt when he was carrying Jesus in his arms, and that's what the Father would have felt. And so at that moment, he had a profound experience of what the Father experienced when he saw his son dead. And so he had a profound understanding of mercy and the Father's mercy towards humanity. So then seeing the destruction, seeing how sin destroys man. You know, it's so funny. Sometimes we make jokes about sin. Sometimes I'm going to live it next year, or I can live with this sin. But sin always kills. Sin always destroys. And I think that Jean Paul had a profound understanding of the consequences of sin. And so therefore, if we are a sinful humanity, or we're living in a very simple moment in history, we need to turn to mercy. That means we need to turn to the forgiveness of the Father. We need to turn to be restored in our dignity, because one of the consequences of sin is that it steals, robs our dignity. And why does it do that? Because the enemy doesn't want us to have the dignity we have. Remember that he was an angel, and a very important angel. And he hates us because he cannot understand that the Father loves us so much and that the Father gave us such a dignity. That's why when we read in Psalm, I think it's 89 or 8, who is man that you think of them? ¿Qué es el hombre que te acuerdes de él? What is man that you will remember him? ¿Qué es el hombre para que le des tanto poder? What is man for you to give him so much power? You made him almost at the same level of angels. We're not angels, we're human persons, but we were elevated in such a dignity. And the enemy hates our dignity. You need to understand that. So that's why he invites us to sin, so we can lose not only our dignity, we can wound our souls and our hearts. And so when humanity is going through so much suffering and sin and darkness, we need to turn to God's mercy, so to receive healing, to receive forgiveness, and to receive restoration. And the beautiful part is that we are sinners, but we have the capacity to be forgiven. That's why we have the sacrament of confession. but we also have the grace through the sacraments and the love of God to be healed and to be restored, and not only restored, even to become greater. To become greater. Lucas and Mary Magdalene, Lucas and Paul. So I will say it was a complex situation that led him to divine mercy. But definitely then, when he was Archbishop of Krakow, he read all the diary of Saint Faustina. And so he was very much in knowledge of everything with Saint Faustina. Now remember that the book of Saint Faustina was for some time prohibited. And the reason was because one of the sisters translated the book and did a wrong translation. And so there were a lot of theological errors, but not because Saint Faustina wrote them, but because the translator wrote them. So one of the missions of Karol Wojtyła, when he became an Archbishop of Krakow, seeing that for so many years and in so much destruction, people were turning to the Divine Mercy. Actually, people were making little photocopies of the image of Divine Mercy and passing it all over Poland. Some people say that even some of the images, photocopies at that time, but that even those photocopies, some of them got into the concentration camps. We don't have a proof of that, but some survivors said that they saw the image of Divine Mercy. So he was really interested into that, and he had the message study, he had a good translation being done, and he was the one, as Archbishop of Krakow, who opened up the case of canonization of Saint Faustina with the revised version of the translation. Now, when he was elected, at the very beginning of his election, in the Divine Our Lady of Divine Love shrine in Italy, he said that from the first moment of his election, he knew that his task for his pontificate was Divine Mercy, and that the situation of humanity, the situation of the world, had been the reason why the Lord called him to be an apostle and a messenger of Divine Mercy. So we can see that at the beginning of his pontificate, he knew that he had to do something to promote all over the world the message of Divine Mercy, and that he was chosen for that. That he said, I made it the reason of my pontificate, to let the message of Divine Mercy known. And as you know, he canonized Saint Faustina in April 30th of the year 2000. She is the first saint of the year of the new millennium. And on the same day, which he gave a beautiful homily, and he said, Faustina, Faustina, one of the greatest gifts of God to the 20th century. One of the greatest gifts of God for the 20th century. And then he said, may the message of Divine Mercy be taken through the whole world como una antorcha en las Olimpiadas. Like the fire, exactly, like the torch of the Olimpiadas. This message has to be taken to the whole world. So he gave us an order. It has to be taken to the whole world because the future of humanity, he says, depend on Divine Mercy. And in his last book, he said something powerful. There's a whole chapter in his last book, and I said his last because he died in April 2005, and in February 2004, it was published. His book is Memory and Identity. I recommend to all of you to read that book. There's a whole chapter between why we have so much evil in the world, what is the place of evil in the plan of salvation, why does the Lord allow evil, but the most important chapter is what is the end of evil. And he said, evil has a limit. And never forget that. I know that we're seeing a lot of evil, and every morning we're getting a news of another attack someplace else, and that's not the only evil. We're seeing a lot of evils in today's world. But the most important thing is not that we see the evil, even though we need to see it because we need to respond to it, but that we know that evil doesn't have the last word. And that we Christians believe that the cross didn't have the last word. The last word was the resurrection. And so for us, we need to believe, if we want to follow the teachings of John Paul, what he said, evil has a limit. And we need to believe that evil has a limit. I know we're kind of in the middle of the storm, and when you are in the middle of the storm, you think the storm is never going to pass. Well, evil has a limit. And he said the limit to evil is divine mercy. Why? Because the Father doesn't want us to be destroyed. Because the Father doesn't want us to be wounded. Because the Father doesn't want us paying so much consequences of all darkness. The Father sent His only Son to save us, to heal us, to redeem us. He sent His Son out of divine mercy. And all the work of Jesus on earth was a work of divine mercy. And so the end to evil is the mercy of God. So I don't know if I responded, but at least I gave you a little journey through divine mercy. But the most important that we need to remember, we're going to say it together, is evil has a limit.
Evil has a limit.
Evil has a limit.
And the limit to evil is?
And the limit to evil is
Divine mercy.
divine mercy.
So when we hear so much darkness, we have to say, hey, in the name of Jesus, this evil must have a limit. And by the power of His mercy, it must have a limit. Okay, and we have to take that authority as baptized Christians. Okay, anything else?
How old was he when he found the woman from Auschwitz?
How old was he? He had to be about 21, basically. Yes.
Can you explain a little bit about his life during that time of Auschwitz and the Nazis?
During the time of Auschwitz, he was working in the stone mine. And he never knew why he was not sent to Auschwitz. We know why. I mean, of course he didn't know why he was not sent. I mean, all his friends were sent, either killed or sent to concentration camps. But something beautiful about that time, yes, there's the most beautiful thing about that time, because in the midst of ugliness and darkness, there's always a lot of beauty, is that John Paul began experiencing his vocation to the priesthood when he was reading the book of True Devotion to Mary. It was through a lady. He said, I cannot deny that my vocation was born through the heart of Mary. So by reading True Devotion to Mary, he began to experience the vocation to the priesthood. But he hadn't confirmed it. He hadn't made a total choice to enter the seminary. At the moment when people were being killed in the streets, that he was seeing all the mistreatments and all the things that were happening, and he saw so much destruction. He saw the destruction of the city of Warsaw. He saw the destruction in many of the cities. He saw his friends being taken. He made a choice, and this is very important, young people. You know, because we think that we have to live in a beautiful environment to make good choices. No, nobody will be able to make good choices because none of us have a perfect environment. So when he saw the suffering of his people, when he saw the destruction of sin, when he saw death, concentration camps, that's when he said, I want to be a priest. My vocation has been confirmed in the middle of war. Because I want to be a priest, because I want to do something to make this world a better place. So he understood that his vocation had the purpose of building a new civilization. And he also said something beautiful that at least it touches deeply my heart. He said, I also know that my vocation is the fruit of so many deaths. Many people dying for my vocation. So he said, my vocation has been born and has blossomed from the altar of the sacrifice of so many people. Beginning with his spiritual director and confessor who was killed. Another thing that happened to him was that, as you all know, he had to go into clandestine seminary because they were not allowed to have a seminary. So he lived with the archbishop at that moment, and it was interesting. Nobody could tell they couldn't tell anybody they were going to seminary. For those who are in seminary or are planning to be, I mean, you speak freely about it. They couldn't say to anybody that they were going to seminary. They couldn't study together. They couldn't do anything. They couldn't build community. And in the day, he was working in the stone thing, and then at night he will go to have classes for seminary and sleep in the house of the archbishop. But in the day of his ordination, he was ordained alone. And that was really hard for John Paul. Because every morning, imagine you live in Krakow, you're going to the seminary, and every morning you have to walk. He was walking. We saw in the museum, the type of clothing that he used. And they had like big, like places like that, they had the names of those who donated. They had the names of those who had been killed. So every morning, everybody had to go and see if my father had been killed, if my mother had been killed, or my friends had been killed. And so every morning he will see somebody that he knew that had been killed, including his professors, his classmates, or sometimes his seminarians, companions. So he is the only one that survived the group of seminarians that were studying together. So he was ordained alone. And when he was prostrated, that the priest, we're not going to have Father lay down here, but Father had to lay down with his face on the floor, the whole body on the floor. And at that moment, everybody's singing the litany of the saints. In that moment, when he was prostrated, he said, Lord, why me? Why me? Like saying, why did you leave me alive? Why me? Of course, he didn't know he was going to be John Paul II. And we know that the Lord preserved his life miraculously. And so he asked himself with a lot of pain. He was crying when he was prostrated on the floor. He said, why me? Why I am alive? And at that moment, he himself, because he asked a lot of fundamental questions. That's why he teaches us to ask questions, so he can have answers, fundamental answers. And he asked, why am I alive? Lord, why did you preserve my life? And at the same moment, while the litany is being sung, he responded, I'm being preserved to donate myself. And I think that's one of the most powerful phrases of John Paul II. The Lord has preserved my life, not for me. The Lord preserved my life so I can give it freely to others. And so that was like, I will say, that was like an internal motto of John Paul II. I will live to give my life for others until the last day. That's why when he was asked, are you going to resign? When he couldn't even walk, and he said, are you going to resign? He said, Jesus didn't come down on the cross, I can. And so until the last moment of breath, he was thinking of us, especially of the youth. The last words of John Paul II were given for the youth. He said to you, he said, thank you for coming. I went to you and you have come to me. Because the young people were singing in St. Peter's Square. And he heard the singing of the youth. And that's recorded by Cardinal Jewish, that he looked through the window. He was dying, and he asked to be taken to the window so he could see the youth. But he was not, they said, no, you cannot do that. And so he said, I went looking for you, and now you have come to me. And then he said, let me go to the house of the Father. He had a tear in his eye, and he died. So what was the last thought of John Paul II? The youth. You were his first thought, and you were also his last. And why do I say that he was the first? Because when he was instituted, when they installed in the Mass of October 22nd, when he was installed as a pope, I don't know if you remember the video. If you, maybe you don't remember the video. Maybe you were not born. Okay, so you have to see it. The Mass ends, it's a solemn Mass, it's the installation of the Pope. That's when he said, be not afraid. Don't aviate paura. Él dijo, no, do not be afraid. Open wide the hearts of your heart to Christ, because only Christ knows what's in the human heart. That is the reason why we need to open up our hearts. I mean, we all know that he said that in his Mass of installation, but hardly, unless if you see the videos, you don't see what he did after the Mass ended. He's greeting everybody, and the security are saying, Holy Father, you cannot move. And he said, I have to move. I have to move. So he's coming down to approach the people. And when he approached the people, there was a humongous group of young people. And he didn't speak to anybody else. He looked at the young people and he said, you are my hope. You are the hope of the church. So his first words were to the youth, and his last words were to the youth. So you have to be proud to know that St. John Paul II, the greatest est, was very grateful that the youth came to accompany him in his last hours. And I'm sure that he must be looking at us, smiling at us, and from the house of the Father, and the window of the house of the Father, he is blessing us. He's blessing us from the house of the Father. Okay, so sister, did we finish?
Any other question?
What time is it? It's 6. Okay, I'm going to try to respond. The thing is, it's hard to respond just short, because there's history behind everything that he did.
There's another question.
Noel?
How many times have you met John Paul, and what was that like?
How many times I saw John Paul? Well, we had like 7. We participated in 7 private masses. The private masses were in a little chapel in the Vatican, inside in the apartments, in the papal apartments, which every mass, it was really, I could hardly concentrate in the mass, I can say that, because to see a living saint celebrating mass is like your eyes are more in the contemplation of the saint that is living out his mass. So I have to say that I was a little distracted. It was a little chapel, and Sister Anna was in many of them. And Ana Margarita was blessed by John Paul when she was about 3 months old. She was in one of those masses with her mom. Because we wrote a letter and we shared about the miracle of her life and how Beatriz chose not to abort it when all the doctors were saying that she should abort Ana Margarita. And so Ana Margarita, not Beatriz, Ana Margarita was invited by John Paul II to go to the Mass.
She was what? 9 years old?
Beatriz was the mother that was accompanying.
How old was she? Mother, how old was she? 1 year? I think it was 1 year.
Yeah, because she was crying a lot. I mean, it's a 3 months old, and she's the invited one, so John Paul is gonna enjoy it, That he kissed her. There's a beautiful picture. Jean Paul kissed Ana Margarita. I mean, these are the private masses, and the private masses were in a little chapel. Maybe the most 20 persons could be there. And he was totally immersed in prayer. One of the things is that we had to be there early, and they had to take us through a passage and security and everything. And every time we went in the chapel, he was kneeling before the Blessed Sacrament, and he had been kneeling for 2 hours praying before the Blessed Sacrament. So when we came in, he was at the ending of his personal prayer time. And then he will bless himself and begin to celebrate Mass. And he was totally immersed in prayer. You could tell that he was in total communion with the Lord. And now we know, after he died, that he had a lot of conversations with the Lord and Our Lady. I mean, real, conversations with the Lord and Our Lady. And there's a lot of testimonies today, so those who celebrated Mass with him daily. But one thing, his eyes were always closed, and you knew that he was speaking to the Lord about the whole church and about humanity. That's what you could perceive. But the first encounter, it was not in private masses. The first encounter, and one that I treasured the most. I treasure the first one that I'm going to speak about. Of course, I treasure all the private masses that we had. And then, let me tell you, he had a tremendous memory. He remembered everyone and everything. Because we had to line up at the end of the Mass. After Mass, he will stay sometime in prayer. So we had to be in prayer, and then we will be lining up, and they will introduce us. So Cardinal Jewish will be going and saying, she's Maria from Argentina, and he will go introducing everybody, including us, and 20 people, 25 people, with cardinals and bishops and everybody the same. And when he will come back, he will be coming back and saying, hello, Amada, hello, how's Miami? He will come back saying your name and asking you something about the place that you were from. Amazing memory. And the first time that he saw us, we were 4 sisters, and they had introduced us. The introduction is very solemn, and they say, this is Mother Adela and the sisters. It's a new foundation in the Diocese of Miami. And then when he's coming back, he's making personal comments to everybody. So he looked at us, and he put his finger on my nose. And he was going like this, like playing with my nose, and I'm like, what do you do when a Pope does that? And then he smiled. He has such a humor. And then he smiled and he said, He went like this. You are good. Looking at the sisters and myself, you're good. I said, well, at least you look good. And so he began cracking up. And we were laughing, but just laughing. We didn't know what to say, if you respond or you don't respond anything. So those are beautiful memories that we have. Citana, if you remember anything, remind me, please. But the first encounter, you're going to like it, because it has to do with the youth. And that's one that I treasure very deeply. It was when John Paul II went to Miami in 1987, and that famous trip to the United States, which it was good and not so good, because it was a difficult moment in the church in the United States. And so, there was like a lot of dissent, and so some dissenters were asking for things that they shouldn't be asking, and he will hear them and heal them. He will hear them with such a pastoral heart and then give the right response. We had the prayer group, and in our prayer group we had 2 young girls that were totally paralyzed. So we took them in a wheelchair, and we spent the whole night in the Miami Park and waiting for the Holy Father and this and that. Which, by the way, we were able to go to receive him with a small group, since we were leaders, to receiving in small group at the airport, and it was so funny because the two planes arrived at the same time, Alitalia and the one that Air Force One. At that moment, it was President Reagan, and President Reagan and John Paul are coming out of their planes at the same time. And everybody's just screaming to John Paul, and it was so bad. Nobody was even greeting the President of the United States. But okay, we went to have the vigil, the whole all-night vigil, like the one you're gonna have. And it was like 100 young people, and it's basically the same thing. 100 people, and we're waiting for John Paul, and so next morning, the Mass. And well, the Mass began, and as soon as the gospel began to be proclaimed, it became totally dark, and these terrible clouds covered the area of the park. And it's confirmed by the NASA that it was only in the area of the park. And the most terrible rain began. He never forgot this. And it began raining, but the rain, it was not the problem. It's that we had a lot of thunderstorms. And so the security of the United States were very concerned in such a big crowd with thunderstorms. And so they spoke to the Archbishop of Miami of that time, and he decided to cancel the Mass. And so imagine that we never heard his homily. After the gospel, the Archbishop announced that the Mass was canceled because it was raining, and the security was very concerned about the thunderstorms. So imagine immediately everybody began leaving, brothers and sisters, leaving. Thousands of people leaving the Tamiami Park. And I remember, we were divided by fences. I remember I was holding myself with the fences, and I was just crying because I couldn't believe that John Paul was there and that everybody was leaving. For me, it was like a moment of internal revelation of how many children leaving the church. That's what it symbolized to me, the desolation of the womb of the church. So many children leaving the church for less things than a thunderstorm. So I looked at the youth group, like you, and I said, I'm not leaving. Everybody's free to go, but if you want to stay, you can stay. If you want to go, you're free to go, but I'm not leaving. And so the whole group said, we're staying. And I said, okay, if we're staying, since everybody's leaving, we're gonna run to the front. But imagine, everything was full of mud, and it was terrible. So we began running and getting all the mud in our faces, and with the wheelchairs, and running, because I knew it's impossible, and Father can confirm that, it's impossible that a Catholic priest, unless he's killed in the middle of a Mass, cannot interrupt the Mass. And so we ran, and we got to the point where the priest used to be sitting. And so there was this humongous guy from the FBI, and I told the group, let's sing happy songs, and very, very strongly, very loud. So wherever he is, he knows that some people have not abandoned him. And so we began singing Alabaré, Alabaré, and all the charismatic songs very high. And the FBI comes and says to me, because he knew that I was leading the group. I was giving the instructions. And he said, you have to go. And I said, no, we have freely chosen to go. He said, well, the Pope is not here. And I said, well, if he's not here, what are you doing here? You should be taking care of him. So with that argument, He just went backwards. And we were singing and singing. I cannot tell you, we wanted to sing our lungs out. And singing for 25 minutes. And 3 times the FBI will come and say, he's not here. I will say the same thing. So what are you doing? What are you taking care of us? Are we so important that you're here for us? And, well, they stopped saying anything. So 25 minutes after, because the altar, it had a lot of steps and it was high. And then from the top of the altar, Monsignor Marini, which was the one in charge of the liturgy of John Paul II, just came out, looked at us, and I said, I knew it. He's here. Oh no, one of the FBI said, how do you know he's here? That was the third one. I said, for 2 reasons. One is liturgical, and the second one is liturgical, and the other one is out of love. I said liturgically because no priest can interrupt the Mass, so whenever he is, he's finishing the Mass. And second, because I can feel his heart. His heart is beating, he's close. And so Monsignor Marini showed up, looked at us, and I'm like, don't do anything, keep on singing, keep on singing. And so he came down and he said, please don't move from here, because the Holy Father is going to come to greet you. Imagine how we felt. It was empty, totally empty. I think the most, it was a group and maybe 20 more people that when they saw these young people running, they just joined us. And so like 15 minutes later, John Paul came. He came down the stairs and he came, and I will never forget what he said. He looked, I had like a very orange, even more orange than the one that Andreita has, jacket that we picked up in the way, running. And he went to me and he said it. For me, that was a sign of the Lord because he didn't know who I was, or, we're in a group. He came to me and he looked at me and he said, because you have been faithful. Because you have been faithful. And that marked my life. Because you have been faithful in the middle of the storm. I will give you a special apostolic blessing. And all of us knelt, and he extended his arms, he prayed for us, and he gave us a blessing. And so what is the teaching that I learned in 1987 at that moment from him, from his lips? To be faithful in the middle of the storm. Not when things are easy, not when we're together singing, no, in the middle of the storm, we need to be faithful and we need to be creative. Because when everybody was running out, we were running in. Because love should be able, if we're killed by a thunder because of the Holy Father, hey, we'll go to heaven, that's for sure. I said, martyr for John Paul II, that's no problem. But he honored that fidelity, and he wanted us to know. He said, I heard you. He said, the first thing he said, I heard you while I was celebrating Mass, and you consoled my heart. And that's when he said, because you have been faithful in the middle of the storm, I will give you a very special apostolic blessing. And so all of Miami lost it. Only 100 of us got the apostolic blessing of John Paul II.
Mother, we're 100. We're 100.
We're 100. That's why he must be looking and remembering. And he never forgot, because every time we went to Mass and they said, they're from Miami, he would smile and said, oh, Miami, it rained a lot. So I don't know. Sister, you tell me. I'm following you. Anybody has one? The last one at least? Oh, yes. Thank you, sister. Remember that I told you, I don't know when, remind me to tell you something at the end about John Paul? Okay, 5 days later, we'll remember. It's age, It's going to happen to you. That's something that happened to John Paul. When he was elected a bishop, he was 38, and he was canoeing with the students, and that's how theology of the body began, by talks that he will have with the university students canoeing or in mountains. And so he got a letter saying, the cardinal needs to see you immediately. So you see him running with his shorts and his tennis, and somebody gave him a ride. So he appeared in front of the cardinal with shorts and tennis, and the cardinal went like this. And said, I was in mission with the young people, and he said, no, the Holy Father has named you a bishop. And he said, but I am so young. And the cardinal said, don't worry about it. That's gonna pass soon. That's not a problem. It's gonna go away. Well, what I wanted to remind you, this is very important. The exorcist, the official exorcist from Rome, Father Amorth, is an old priest that has been the exorcist in the Diocese of Rome for a long time. He lately was interviewed about a lot of questions about the exorcism, the amount of exorcisms, and he said that there are two names that every time he mentions, the enemy gets crazy. First and foremost, and at a total different level, our Blessed Mother, and at a second level, St. John Paul II. And so he was noticing that every time he prayed through the intercession of St. John Paul, the evil spirits will be very violent. And it was happening in a lot of young people. And so, in a lot of, possessed people. And so he said that in one of the exorcisms, he began to ask the evil spirit, why do you hate John Paul so much? And he said, because he stopped and blocked my plans, and because he stole the youth from my hands. And so I just want you to know that. Pray to John Paul II to protect you, so you're never stolen from the hands and the hearts of God and our ladies. Okay?